How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Lando's Lock-Ins, the series where we do our darndest, our best to try and make the most accurate CDL pick'em predictions possible. What a weekend, right? What a weekend that we just experienced. The Optic Texas Major was everything that we wanted it to be, and then some. If you were in the venue, if you were at the esports stadium, you had a wonderful time, I'm sure. I mean, it looked like everybody was having a blast. I mean, TST was doing their thing. Hex, the boys, Esports Engine, Optic Texas. It felt like it was the perfect collaboration, the perfect way to kick off this Vanguard year. I think from a viewing perspective, everybody seemed to really enjoy themselves as well with the games, the matches. You know, we had some downtime here or there, but everybody did a great job at making sure the show was running as smooth as possible. Just got to say, it was a wonderful event to be a part of. I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary from myself and everybody else. I mean, it was a blast. It really was. It was a great time. Some great matches, some great stories. And I also want to say as well, thank you guys so much for the amount of support that we saw on the last video, especially. I mean, I have loved doing these lock-in videos, and we're only going to continue to do these as well as other CDL content, so you should stay tuned for that. But the amount of support that you guys showed in the last video was amazing. It really was. It was fantastic. We got over 15,000 views on our Optic Texas Major video. You know, obviously on the lock-in side of things. We also got 700 plus new subscribers who have now joined the family. So I greatly appreciate you guys for tuning in as well. Obviously, if you're new here, welcome. Super happy to have you. And yeah, it's going to be a great year. Like I said, it's just the beginning of Vanguard. We're trying to grow the YouTube. We're trying to put out and push out as much content as we can. Obviously, do these lock-in video series as well as some other things as well. So like I said, make sure to stay tuned for that, because it's not just going to be lock-in videos. We're going to be doing some other things as well. Got some other things in the pipeline. But just want to say, if you've been a subscriber for a while, I had a few people come up and say that they love watching the lock-in videos, and that obviously they've subscribed and stuff like that. So I really appreciate it. If you've been here for a while, or if you're new, welcome. Super happy to have you here. And let's see if we can start off Major 2 Week 1 in the best way possible. I'm looking forward to a solid Major 2. Again, the record, it sits where it does, 28-20 after the Major 1, qualifiers and Major included. Not the best, all right? Not the best. It's over 50. It's you know, it's above 500, but we'll see if we can improve as the year goes on. That's going to be our primary focus. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our very first match here of Major 2. And the one thing that also needs to be mentioned, I've seen a few people ask some questions about this. I've seen a few people on Twitter and on socials talking about, like, how does this all function? In case you're not aware, when it comes down to the major tournaments, not champs, but the major tournaments, everything is reset. So a team like New York, who went what, like 1-5, including their qualifier games and their performance at Major 1, that gets reset in terms of their qualifying for Major 2. That overall progress throughout all 4 of our majors will come into effect for champs. So we do have this overarching type of seeding when it comes down to champs, but for each major specifically, those are their own entity. So all of these teams, right, coming into week 1 are starting off 0-0, but at the same time, they do have their progress being tracked throughout all of the majors for champs and for other things as well. So just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page, make sure that nobody's confused, because I understand if you don't have someone explain it to you, or if you haven't looked at the wiki website or the CDL website, it can get a little bit confusing. So with that in mind, I think we've covered everything. I think we've marked everything off the checklist. Let's jump into our first game. London Royal Ravens versus the New York Subliners, which to me already is a pretty interesting game. This is going to be a difficult one to predict, because if you haven't already seen it, the London Royal Ravens did tweet out that they are going to be bringing in Paul X for the next 2 weeks. You're wondering why? Is because Gizmo is going to be out for personal reasons. I don't know the extent of that. Obviously, it's none of my business. It sounds like it could be a family issue. So obviously, wish Gizmo the best. Hope that he has a quick recovery, and hope everything is going well for him personally. But it does definitely make things a little difficult. Obviously, if you are the London Royal Ravens, obviously, granted, it makes perfect sense. Gizmo's got to do what he's got to do. But it does obviously impact the Ravens a little bit. As we said, right, you're jumping in from the Major 1 tournament right into Major 2. Like, we are right into the qualifiers. There's no time, there's no downtime, right, to to work things out, even to make roster changes. It's going to be a very quick process at times when we have these, weeks that fall into each other, especially from major to major. So it does suck a little bit. Obviously, if you are London, Gizmo's a great player for them. And it will take them a little bit out of the groove. Obviously, Paul X is a familiar face for the Ravens franchise, but he's not played with any of these guys. So there is a little bit of a, welcoming back party if you are London and Paul X, but at the same time, it's not going to be the easiest transition for this team and for the next few matches for however long Gizmo will be out for. I think in general, right, when you talk about the London Royal Ravens, a great tournament. I mean, their major one was excellent. They got wins versus LAG, who obviously took them out at the Major 1 qualifiers, so they get their revenge there. Then they go on to take on Toronto, which was one of my favorite matches of the weekend, right? Because it is basically the EU team who was dominated, right, last year in Cold War, Toronto Ultra. London Royal Ravens take them down, finish top 3 overall at the event. That goes to show we've got a new European team in town, right? We have got a new top dog for the moment of Europe, which makes me excited because that is exactly what this London team is aiming to do. Obviously, they're not just trying to be the best European team, they're trying to be the best team in the entire world. But that was a very, very big match for both of these rosters. And the fact that London was able to take them out, obviously is going to give them confidence, not just for, the recent future, but I think just in general for the remainder of the season. They did lose to both Atlanta and Optic, which of course both of those teams did go on to win, or rather to compete in the finals of the tournament. So you do have to consider that as well. London, the losses that they have, well, they're versus the top 2 teams that are currently in the game. So you can't take a whole lot from that outside of the fact that it was a solid event for London. And they, at least for me, absolutely cemented themselves as a top 4 at minimum team in the game. And one thing that was also pretty surprising about London, and we'll move on to New York here. One thing that was also surprising about London as well was that it wasn't like a standout performance from the young players, which is what everybody expected. It's what everybody thought was going to happen. It was going to be the Gizmo, the Nasty, the Afro show. It wasn't that at all. It was actually Zero, the vet, the guy that people were constantly talking about how if he can maybe compete with these guys or at least be consistent, this roster could see success. Well, Zero puts up the highest KD overall for the team. He's number 8 overall for the weekend, which was so impressive. And the young guys, all of them below a 1.0. And also, which you could look at this as a positive or a negative, Gizmo does drop a 0.81. That is very different from the way that he played the qualifiers. Again, if there is that personal, stuff looming, that obviously could have had an impact on his performance as well. So the fact that you don't have the greatest performance from the young guys, one of your star players in Gizmo has an off event for obvious reasons, and still they finished top 3 with the vet putting up top 10 KD type of numbers. Very impressive from this Ravens group. And like I said, it could be a good sign for the future that while this team wasn't on the way that you expected, they still are looking like the number 3, number 4 best team in the entire world. Moving on, New York Subliners. A little bit of a different tournament, right, for New York. They were not able to deliver the results that I'm sure a lot of fans were hoping that they would. There was some noise, right? There was some noise for New York talking about how, hey, they're going to have a good week to practice. They get some downtime from the qualifiers to the actual Optic Texas Major. We'll see what they can do. The problem for New York, right, was that they had one of the more difficult draws of teams that would lose in the winners bracket side. So they were going to face off against either the Thieves or the Ultra. I thought they were going to face off against the Ultra and still lose, but they faced off against the Thieves, which is arguably the more difficult matchup of the two for a team like the Subliners. And sadly, they didn't win a map. They get 3-0'd. They face a hard loss versus, as we know, one of the better teams in the game in the LA Thieves. But I think there is something to still be excited about, I guess, if you are the New York Subliners, if you're a fan of the team, in some ways, because it looks like Clay's just on his grind. Like after the loss, he was like, you know what? It sucks. It's all good. I think he privated his Twitter and he's like, I'm just going to grind. Everyone that I have talked to is saying that Clay is actually really enjoying this game. He's really enjoying the grind and he just wants to focus and just, it sounds like he's having a great time playing COD again, which is exactly what you want to hear if you're a Subliners fan. The problem is that the results have not happened yet. So you hope that that does come down the pipeline sooner rather than later, because we could already be getting into conversations about seeding for champs, seeding for, for the big event at the end of the season. You do not want to start off the year slow. Also, Krim just got out of surgery on his ear, which is pretty crazy. It seems like everything has gone smooth with that as well. If you've not been following that, apparently he's been dealing with this for a long time, got some surgery, everything is good, everything went smooth, and he's ready to get back on the grind as well. So you do avoid a few hurdles, I guess, if you are the subliners. But to me, I mean, it just, I don't know. With New York, it's the struggle bus, right? They're 0-10 in Hardpoint. And when we talk about the predictions for this match, that obviously is going to be something you have to think about. When you're facing off against a team with a new player added to the roster, there's obviously going to be an element of surprise, right? But there's also going to be an element of, hey, this team is not at full strength because they're bringing in a fourth who doesn't know how they play, who doesn't know the callouts maybe that they have, who maybe doesn't fit in perfectly role-wise. Paul X will fit very nicely role-wise for the Ravens. But still, if you're New York, you have to look at this as a big opportunity, a big chance to take down this London team that, a majority of the time is not going to be having a player out with personal problems or even injuries, which happen from time to time. The subliners do know that quite well. So I don't know, man. It's a difficult call. It's a difficult prediction because you could look at Paul X being brought into this team, obviously experienced challenger player. He was in the CDL last year. It's not as if they're bringing in some random guy off the street who no one knows how he's going to play. Paul X is going to be solid. But at the same time, for New York, 0-10 in Hardpoint. Is that going to change in this series? I think that this is a good chance for them. And I think if you're the subliners, it's not a must-win game, obviously, but it is a really, really necessary W. Like, with the way that they get knocked out, they finish top 12 at the major. That is the lowest placement that Clay and Krim have had in a very long time. It's the lowest placement that they have ever had together, I'm pretty sure. I mean, they never finished last, I think, ever in their career. So, or if they have, it's not been for a very long time. So with that in mind, I don't know. It's normally I would go with a team like New York. But given the fact that they haven't won a Hardpoint, given the fact that I just don't really still believe that this team can walk away with dubs, I don't know. It's not going to be an easy matchup. And again, you still have the three regular Ravens players who I think are all excellent, who I think are all going to be solid. Zero's coming off a great event. I think Afro's going to be really hungry. I don't know. I'm still going to give this one to the Ravens. I feel like I have to, but does it go game 4? Does it go game 5? I'm going to say it takes a little bit for the Ravens to get themselves grounded, right, with this new addition. I think the subliners can make it close, but I've got the Ravens in a game 5 or game 4. I think I might leave it at a game 4. I don't know. The subliners have just got to show us something. I think they could take a search and destroy here. I don't see them taking a control. Maybe they win a Hardpoint for the first time. I really don't know. It's a hard prediction. It really is. It's a very difficult prediction to make, but I just do not see the subliners walking away with this series versus a team who's top 3. Granted, a roster change is being made for this few weeks, but I still don't see it. I really don't. We'll move on. Boston Breach versus the Seattle Surge. Obviously, if you're the Boston Breach after the Major 1 tournament, I think they should be pretty happy with the way that they performed. I know Zed was talking about how he'd be happy if the team finished top 6. That's what they were able to do. And in fact, they were 1 game away from that top 4 finish, from that top 4 placement, right? They lose that game 5 versus the Ultra. It was the rematch. It was the revenge game for Methods, right? Versus the team in Toronto who dropped him. They'd never faced before, obviously, since that change was made. And he had a great series. He had a great performance, but it was not enough. And somehow, despite Breach winning both Hardpoints, they were not able to take a search and destroy, which is slightly frustrating, right? If you're the Breach, right? If you follow this team, if you're aware of like their progress as a roster, it's like they're either winning Hardpoints and losing search destroys, or they're winning search destroys but not winning Hardpoints, and the control is just not there. It's just not there at the moment. But obviously, if you're the Breach, right, you beat Florida in the game 5, you beat Paris 3-1 after the Legion did take down the Surge, and obviously you're taking on the Surge in this matchup, so maybe there's an element of that to think about. But really, my opinion doesn't change about Boston dramatically, right? Coming into Major 2, I think it's a team that's still trying to figure out their identity, right? It feels like Hardpoint is there sometimes and isn't. And as I said, the same thing could be said for Search Destroy. I think they're a better Search Destroy team than they are a Hardpoint team. But given the series, it just feels like they can't get them together a majority of the time, especially versus top caliber teams. And then to start off the year, right, to start off the Major 1 qualifiers, it felt like this was a team who was going to succeed in small maps for the respawns, right? They come to find out that apparently Bocage is not at all their map. Despite playing it a lot, despite winning it a majority of the time at the Major 1 qualifiers, they come into Major 1, they keep playing Bocage, and they lose it. They keep losing Bocage hardpoint, and they started to see success on the bigger respawn maps. They started to see some W's on Berlin. They started to see some W's on Gavutu. So I really don't know where to call it. I really don't with this Boston Breach team. I think they've got the grit. I think they've got some really good pieces who are only getting better. We saw some sparks of greatness from Nero, who I think can be literally the best player on this team. I saw it happen in the offseason scrimmages. There was something there, and I think that Boston are slowly but surely figuring out where they sit and what their strengths truly are in the map pool. As small as it may be, I think they're still figuring out where they sit for the time. But the problem with the Breach will always be, right? The reason why a hardpoint search destroy is always off primarily is because the control is just not there, right? They're still struggling with that swing game mode. They were 1-3 at Major 1, and they are currently, based off of record, the worst control team in the game, as they sit with a 2-7 record, as I said, in that swing mode. On the other side for Seattle, no idea. No idea where to put these guys. I mean, I heard that they were dominating scrims leading up into Major 1. I was talking with some of the talent in the green room, and they were being told that Seattle was looking excellent. They were looking like the kickoff classic team that we saw to start off the season, that they were back. They were in their LAN element, and they were ready to perform again here in Arlington, and it didn't happen. It did not happen. I was worried about the surge, but I got invigorated. I was like, okay, well, maybe Seattle will be this team that they were to start off the season. But I was worried about them coming into this major before I heard all that information, because since the Kickoff Classic, it hasn't been great, right? It has not been a great performance for Seattle since their opening weekend at the Kickoff Classic, because they finished 3-2. They get a 3-0 win versus New York, which, not to be rude, but it is New York. And then their other two wins are Game 5, Round 11 victories, in which case Accuracy gets a sneak defuse versus the Ultra, and Accuracy clutches a 1v2 versus the Minnesota Rocker. Two situations, one especially, that should absolutely go the other way for Rocker. And the other one, right, which obviously if CleanX is able to check the window over at the B side on Berlin, just seconds faster, Seattle goes from 3-2 to 1-4, and then they obviously have a much worse record, and who knows who they face off against, obviously here at the Major 1 tournament. But they come out of the major in their winners game versus Optic. I think I had that one as a Game 5 because I thought the Surge were going to come out and actually play pretty well, and it doesn't happen. They get 3-0 swept by Optic Texas to kick off the event. They would later go on to face off against Paris, so I'm thinking, okay, cool. Rebound game, rebound opportunity. This is the Legion's this is their first game with Tom Gravity in the lineup. This is surely going to be their chance where the Surge can gain their bearings and focus on the next one. Again, a new roster for Paris, new roles for Paris. Surely they can get it done, and they don't. They don't, right? They give Paris their first win of the season, and arguably what is considered the worst loss that the team has faced this year already. They are on a 4-series losing streak, and in my opinion, the Seattle Surge have made the biggest decline from the start of the season, no question, right? From a team that was literally top 2, top 3 in everyone's power rankings. I would say at the very minimum, top 4. I don't know where they sit right now, but it is nowhere near the top 5. It is nowhere near the top 6, and it's probably nowhere near the top 8 either. I'm sure it's probably in the bottom 4 at this moment. So with all of those things considered, to me, Boston, without a doubt, are the favorites coming into this matchup. But I still think that this could be a toss-up because I don't know exactly what's going wrong with the Seattle Surge. I'll be honest. I've been looking at the records. I've been looking at the stats. I can't specifically say it's this thing. There have been a lot of people who've talked about, well, maybe the Surge, they're one of those teams that just was great at the start of the season. They were really grind heavy. They're a very fast-paced roster as well. All kinds of things. Maybe they were just a team that figured out the game earlier than everybody else. It's just weird because that will happen, but it usually doesn't. It doesn't usually go down that quickly. Like we usually don't see a team go from as much success that they saw as they saw at the Kickoff Classic, to just plummeting to arguably the bottom 5, I would say is fair. So it's just weird. It's a weird situation for Seattle because, I mean, what? Like, we're talking about Sib, we're talking about Pred. I feel like that was probably the best, SMG to flex, combo that we've got. We've got a great, really, fast-paced group of young guys on this Seattle team. I mean, accuracy, as we know, is still incredibly clutch. There's no question about that. Great leader, veteran for this team. So, like, I still want to call Seattle to win this game, but I just can't do it. I can't say that the Surge are going to take this series. I'll be honest. I think that an opportunity for the Surge could be in a control, right? Boston not looking good in control for the moment. So maybe there's an opportunity there where they could take that. Maybe there's a chance they walk away with the opening hard point or the Surge destroy, because as I said, for Boston, it feels like it's either the hard points or the Surge destroys. It's never typically going to be both. Obviously, they've had their moments where they can take those, and there have been series where it happens. I'm just talking on a consistent type of basis. So maybe there's an opportunity where they walk away with the hard point or a search destroy. Maybe if they get the right map, it could be possible. But I am going to give Breach the dub. I have it going to a game 5. Again, another very difficult prediction. Like, I just don't know where Seattle sits for the moment. I like this Breach team, but at the same time, it's worrying to go with a roster who can't win controls, and a team who, actually, at the same time, though, they were just one map away from placing top 4. It's a weird game. It's a weird series. No idea where this one sits. But I think you arguably are going to give Breach the dub. It just doesn't, you have no idea how the Surge are going to come out and play. But I mean, maybe going to a game 5 isn't the smartest thing, because if they do go to a game 5, maybe this is where accuracy can turn up. Literally no idea with this one. We'll go ahead and move on to our final matchup of Friday, which is going to be the Los Angeles Guerrillas going up against the Florida Mutineers. LAG, right? The Los Angeles Guerrillas. It was an in and out type of tournament for them. Pun fully intended with the in and out and LA type of joke. Shout out California. I mean, what? The Guerrillas just managed to get barely a winner's bracket spot coming into the major. They finished with a 2-3 record. The game that they have versus London, where they beat them 3-1, absolutely elevated them in a lot of ways. And like I said, they just barely sneak into that winner's bracket position, where they face off against London again, and they lose it. They get they dropped that one, I think, in a game 5, right? It was a game 5 loss versus the Ravens. Then they go in to face the Rocker, and they get swept 3-0. Like, I'm pretty sure my predictions, I had LAG losing to London round 1, and I'm almost positive that I had Minnesota beating them 3-2. It might have been 3-1. Still, I predicted that LAG would lose, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be a 3-0. If I did, I'm a genius, but I clearly don't remember that. So there's that to think about. I don't know. I mean, it just feels like with LAG, right? What we talked about it coming into the tournament. A team that only wins hard points. They're amazing on hard point, not great in search, destroy, or control. You come into this tournament, they don't win a single hard point. What do you expect? We literally saw the perfect evidence of what LAG is struggling with. I mean, this is a team that we knew had issues coming into this major because they're only winning one game type consistently. They don't win that, they lose both series. I rest my case. Very easy to walk away with this one. They actually won a search, destroy, and a control versus London, which was surprising. So there's that. We know that there's a chance for them to walk away with those. But I'm not overly shocked, right? I had LAG going 0-2 this tournament. I think they had some difficult matchups. London, I thought, was going to be a solid team. They performed better than I thought. And I don't know. I think that Minnesota had a very, very difficult major 1. And that matchup just made perfect sense to me, at least, for Rocker to take them out. So I don't know. I'm not overly shocked. It is weird, though, to see a group of 4 players like this with the lineup that LAG has. To see them finishing top 12 is strange. It is. It is slightly strange. And so with that loss, right? This is a Guerrillas team who, on the season they go 2-3. They are 2-5 right now overall. If we're talking about total record count for the moment, that's not what this team wants. That's not what this team expects. And with 2, in my eyes, winnable games right here versus Florida and Paris, maybe this could be the perfect opportunity for them to turn it around. To me, Guerrillas are probably the team that I'm looking at. There's a few, right? But Guerrillas, to me, are one of the most important teams to watch in all of week number 1. Because, again, it is a team that we talked about. If they don't win early, they could blow up. They could explode. There's a lot of talent here, a lot of voices on this team. And if they start off with only 2 W's throughout the first entire major, and after Major 2 week 1, who knows? Maybe a change could be in place. Maybe a role change could be in place. Probably not a role change, but you got to imagine something's got to give at that point. So definitely be looking out for the Gorillas, because I'm sure that they're coming into both of these games thinking, hey, we got a great chance to go 2-0. We'll see if that can be the case. The first team that they will be facing off against, though, obviously will be the Florida Mutineers. Florida off of a top 12 placement. They did lose the game 5 versus Boston. That game 2 that they had versus the Breach, they lost in round 11. So Florida was up 2-1. They could have swept that series 3-0 had they not lost the round 11 search destroy. So there is something to think about if you are the Mutineers. That series versus Boston was very odd. Like, if you get the chance, I recommend going on Breaking Point, looking at the match tab, and then taking a look at the box score, or at least going back and watching the VOD, and taking a look at the scoreboards, because it doesn't make any sense at all. That series where Florida took on Boston, they outslayed them by 52 kills, but still lost. Awakening dropped a 1.6 in the series. He went plus 45, and they still lost. He put up 119 kills and they still lost. I don't get that. I don't understand how they dominate in slaying. Awakening has arguably his best series ever, statistically, and they don't win. It makes 0 sense to me. It really does. I don't know how you're slaying that much, but still losing. There was a lot of people who specifically looked at that Tuscan Hardpoint game 4 where Awakening dropped some amazing numbers. I think he went like 37-12 or something wild, and they still lost. You don't normally see that. And usually it's on the team that outslayed, right? It's usually on them. It's them not doing something properly is what I'm really trying to say. It's them not properly putting those kills to usage in the objective. So that is something that you have to think about if you're the Florida Mutineers. You don't walk away with that series and go, guys, we outslayed them. Like, we'll get them next time. No, there was something wrong. There was a reason why they were slaying but not putting up the points. Something that I'm sure the Mutineers management are going to be taking a very, very close look at. So with that, this is another interesting series. So we got London versus New York, which is a weird one because you have a roster change. New York, obviously, they've yet to win a hard point. This series, Seattle, massive decline. What's going to go on with them? Boston always feels like a team that could win, could lose in almost every series, except for maybe versus the top of the top teams. And then you have this matchup where I feel like both of these teams are probably the biggest wild cards of the entire CDL, where they can beat top caliber teams and still at the same time lose to run-of-the-mill type of rosters. And so I went pretty deep into this one in regards to the vetoes, because I was like, okay, well, where do both these teams sit? Where do they like to play? From a veto perspective in the hard points, the controls, search destroys, etc. So one thing that's interesting about this series, because this could be some big points. This could be a nice W if this goes the way that we expect it to, right? London are the favorite team, Boston are the favorite team. Who is the favorite team in this situation? So in terms of the vetoes, LAG have a decision to make, right? Because they can either play their game or hard counter the Mutineers as well. So what does that mean? Basically, the Mutineers auto veto is Berlin. That happens to be one of the Gorillas' favorite hardpoint maps. So we run into this situation where LAG can say, okay, cool, they banned our best hardpoint. How about we ban their best hardpoint? LAG likes Bocage, but if they get rid of the Mutineers' best hardpoint map, that could set up LAG to play on Gavutu and Tuscan. I don't know, right? Mutineers just played Tuscan. That was the map where they outslayed heavily, but still lost. So maybe you don't want to face them on that. It just is an interesting situation for the Gorillas, because if they are auto-banning your best hardpoint, or the hardpoint that you like to play the most, do you give them Bocage where they still have a chance and you don't have that second hardpoint map to rely on? Or do you say, okay, let's go ahead and ban their best hardpoint and just play the 2 maps that we've got? So it'll be an interesting decision for the Gorillas specifically to see what they do. It's something to keep in mind. Mutineers should ban Berlin. It just makes perfect sense. What do the Gorillas do? Do they ban Bocage or do they keep it? That will be something to really keep a close eye on. And then the whole Tuscan side of things as well. Maybe they just say, you know what? We don't want to play Tuscan versus this Mutineers team because Awakening destroyed on it last time. They should win those. Maybe they'll figure it out. So there's that. Also, in the last 5 series, I also did mention this as well in regards to the Bocage thing. In the last 5 series, Florida have played Bocage. They've won it 3 times and they've lost it twice. The 2 losses that they have, one of them is a 20-point loss to the best hardpoint team in the game, the Thieves, and the other one is a 1-point loss to the Toronto Ultra. So that just heavily emphasizes what this veto is going to be for the Gorillas. Again, do you want to play Bocage and play your game, which is what we always hear, or do you want to get rid of this hardpoint where Mutineers have a ton of reps on, they're taking some of the best teams, the distance on this map, or do you want to get rid of it and try some other maps, right? And then obviously the big conversation for both these teams, Florida, when they're walking away with the game 1 hardpoint victory, they're winning the series. All of their victories so far have come from the game 1 hardpoints. We know the deal with the LAG side. If they're winning hardpoints, they're at least going to game 5 or winning a series. If they're losing hardpoints, they're getting beaten. That's just the way that it works. So there's something to think about there. Also, okay, we went super deep into the vetoes on this one. Something interesting. You didn't think that we were going to get that way, did you? You thought, okay, LAG versus Florida. Okay, who cares? Move on. No, we're diving deep on this one. Something interesting also. Both of these teams are the number 11th and the 12th, number 11th, the 11th and 12th worst teams in Search Destroy in the CDL. The only wins that Florida have in Search Destroy are on Berlin. They've got 2 of them. LAG, they only have 3 Search Destroy wins on the season, and those are on Berlin. So I have no idea who wins this. Like I said, it's going to be interesting. Somebody might have to win a Search Destroy, and it might have to be a Berlin in which both of these teams are only winning Berlin. LAG have got a big decision to make in the vetoes because you're going to play Bocage, you're not going to play Bocage. No clue what's going to happen in this series. And I honestly could see this one going either way. I thought about flipping a coin. I don't know if that's disrespectful because I legitimately think that both these teams could walk away with this. But I'm going to give it to the vets. I'm going to give it to LAG. I don't know. I really like this Mutineers team. I've talked about it consistently, but I mean, LAG at least went to a game 5 versus London, who finished top 3. Florida are losing game 5s to Boston, but again, they're 1 Search Destroy away. Like, LAG basically lose in game 5 to a top 3 team. The Mutineers, they lose to a team in Boston who finished top 6, who were 1 game away from finishing top 4. I have no idea. Again, I'm going to go with LAG. I'm going to go with the veterans on this. But again, this is a series that I could see going either way. But I was happy to break this one down specifically and go really in depth with it. We spent a lot of time talking about LAG versus Florida, but I am very eager to see exactly how this series ends up going down. It should be a fun one. So, LAG, right back into the mix. This is the first time that we've actually seen a team play back-to-back games so far this year. So that will be an interesting turnaround to see how they, recap versus Florida and then just instantly jump into that series versus Paris. Maybe it's a positive, maybe it's a negative. No clue. So I have them off of a 3-1 win versus the Mutineers. As we said, a big week for LA Gorillas. I told you to keep your eyes on them, obviously, for the vetoes in the last series, and then end this game versus Paris. So, Paris Legion, what's going on with those guys? There have been rumors that have been going around talking about how Jimbo from Challengers, North American Challengers, could be joining this team. There's been a lot of speculation about it. I know Crone, aka Intel Call of Duty, has been all over this one, talking about how it could be a possibility. I think that it's going to happen. I don't know for sure, but it just feels like that is going to take place. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go through the rest of this as if Jimbo is on the team, who, again, is a very successful Challenger player, one of my favorite mechanically gifted players that we have in Challengers. Been there for a while, been on some top caliber teams, some top caliber organizations when it comes down to Challengers as well. So a very exciting prospect. He gets brought in alongside Gravity as well as John and Temp. So I believe that it would be Fellow in this situation getting dropped from this team, meaning that it'd be Jimbo and John on the SMGs, which I cannot wait to say if that does in fact happen, because you got J&J. There's a lot of puns that could be made there. And then you've also obviously got Temp and Tom Gravity on the ARs. So Paris, we already talked about them a little bit, right? They get the W versus Seattle, which I think we were all really excited about. If you're a Surge fan, that absolutely sucked. But if you're a Legion fan, But like they had the team interview on the stage. It was just perfect. Like Tempest talking to the crowd, like, you guys actually mess with us. Like, you guys actually like us. This is awesome. They get their first W. Obviously, they would later go on to lose in their very next series, but still, it was a nice moment. It felt like everybody was super excited to see the Paris Legion team walk away with a dub. And I would say, arguably, they might have been like a top 3 fan favorite type of roster. Like, Boston got some love. Obviously Optic got tons of love. It felt like London at times did. It felt like the Thieves at times did. I'm trying to think of who else got some love for the crowd. There was quite a few Minnesota fans. I would say that one might contend with Paris on where the crowd was leading, but you guys heard it, right? In that Paris versus Surge game, everybody wanted the Legion to win. So with that in mind, obviously it was a great moment for the Legion, and I'm hoping that these changes are happening. I mean, I obviously hate to see players get dropped, but from the sake that you have walked away with one series W throughout all of the Major 1, you got to make changes. It just only makes sense, especially for this Paris team who, you know, it looks like a change could be perfect for them. And if it is coming from challengers, that's exactly what you want to see, right? That's exactly what you want to see from this Paris franchise, who has been criticized in the past for not going with younger type of talent. So the fact that they've got Gravity, he wins in his very first series, right? He has an instant impact. He played great in his opening game versus Seattle. He had like a 1.13 KD. So that was excellent to see. Now, if they are going to bring in Jimbo, which, as I said, we'll rock with that. If they do bring in Jimbo, who is a phenomenal SMG player, who I think can be a great addition to this team, Paris are only getting better. Plus, in the series versus Seattle, I will say they finally did what I thought they could do and what I feel like the game plan for this team for the future can be, which is to win the Search Destroys, right? To be the 2-3-5 team, win the Search Destroys, steal a respawn, maybe a control. And if they can get good at Tusken, obviously we know what they can do on Gavutu from time to time. So there is that as well. So in this series, right, getting down to predictions, LIG, known as a hardpoint heavy team, known as a roster that's going to be great in those modes. It's another big game for them off the back-to-back, which again, we've never seen before, at least to my knowledge, versus this new Paris team. Again, it's another difficult prediction because we don't know what's going to happen with Paris. We don't know if they're going to make the dramatic turnaround with 2 new players. This would be Tom Gravity's 3rd series. This would, with Paris. This would be Jimbo's first if he does come into the team, which as of this recording has not happened yet. If it does get announced, I don't know, man. I'm going to give Paris the dub. I'm going to go with Paris 3-2. Again, I think the Search Destroy strength is only getting there. I feel like the pickup of Tom Gravity for the Legion is great for the future. I said this on the desk because I was on the desk at the time where Paris had just beaten Seattle, and I was like, I love this move not just because they won. I would have said this regardless if they would have won or lost. I love the addition of Gravity for the future. He has played with basically every single top challenger player since challengers has been a thing in the CDL. Since the CDL has existed, and arguably before that, he's basically played with everybody. He's played with basically every top challenger player who has joined into the CDL. He is a great younger piece who is going to be enriched, who's going to want to grind, who is going to be a coach in and out of game. He is the definition of a veteran type of AR who knows how to work with challenger players. It's literally like having a classic, it's like having a classic Call of Duty AR who's a younger guy and who knows the challenger scene incredibly well. So I'm excited about the future of the Paris Legion. I hope that if they do decide to bring in Jimbo, that they see success early. I hope that Paris get rewarded for doing what is arguably the right thing, which is going toward challengers and obviously grabbing some younger players, which, as we have said, is the route to go toward. It's just the way that it works. Moving on, we're getting off some LIG talk. We'll jump into the what are the middle games of Saturday, and a big one at that. LA Thieves versus the London Royal Ravens. We've always talked about the Ravens, right? They'll be off of a win versus the New York Subliners. Most likely, I mean, as far as I know, it sounds like Gizmo still will not be here for this game. It'll only be a one-day difference, so I'm just going to go ahead and assume that Paul X will be playing in this series as well. But obviously on the other end for the Los Angeles Thieves, I had this team making the finals at Major 1. I gave them a lot of props. I had them beating Toronto. I had them beating London. I had them beating Optic at Major 1. Didn't exactly happen that way. Didn't have the same impact. But to me, it all comes down to that opening loss that they suffered versus the Ultra. I mean, that made them run into, well, it didn't make them run into it, but it set them up to face off later against FaZe in that losers round 3 game where they were up 2-0 and got reverse swept. And as soon as that first W happened for FaZe, as soon as they clutched up, I think it was a Tuscan Control. Once that happened, it just felt like FaZe was going to the finals. From that moment forward, it felt like, okay, Thieves, you've allowed for FaZe to wake up. You've given them a chance. Now is their chance to really go off and to visit Optic in the finals, which would happen. So it is a little annoying because I did have the Thieves rocking the merch, not intentional, but you know, it is a plug regardless. I did have the Thieves going far. They don't make it as far as I thought, but as I said, that opening loss versus Toronto really stung. And honestly, I actually would have liked the Thieves' chances versus this very team in that winner's bracket matchup. I really didn't think that game for Toronto matched up well versus London. I feel like the Thieves would have matched up a little bit better, and it's difficult because Thieves versus a new London team, like how is that really going to work out? I'll make this one pretty quick. I think Thieves are going to take it. I think Thieves take it in a 3-1 fashion. I really don't know what map that London could take. It honestly could be a 3-0. I might rock with that prediction as well. I'm just very confident in the Thieves. We've obviously seen the changes, which is awesome that the CDL is making to ping. So the Thieves who are in Los Angeles are going to be on the same ping differential than a team like London who are going to be in North Carolina. So this is an East Coast versus West Coast type of battle. They're all going to be on basically the same ping, which is excellent. There is a way that the CDL is working that out, and that's awesome. That is literally one of the best things that you could absolutely have, especially in an online environment. So very excited about that. I think I'm going to call this a 3-0. Again, I just have a lot of respect for this Thieves team, especially in the hard points. I love I love my solid hard point teams, man. They go 6-1 at the major. I forget what they finished, like top 6, I want to say, right? If they're losing in losers round 3. I'm going to double check just because I don't want to get this wrong. Yeah, they do finish top 6 along with Boston. They finished, like I said, 6-1 in hardpoint at the major. They are 14-3 on the season in hardpoint, which is absolutely fantastic. So we'll see how that pans out. London's also a team who likes to play some of the bigger maps in the respawns. They like themselves some Berlin. They like themselves some Gavutu. Thieves, we know they love some Gavutu, right? They love some Gavutu. They love themselves some Berlin hardpoint, which used to be their auto veto. Now they're playing it and dominating on it. A lot of layers for this Thieves team. So I'm excited on what the Thieves can do. And yeah, I think they get the dub pretty easily here versus a injured Ravens roster. Again, if it's the full Ravens roster, everything's different. But I'm going to go with the Thieves here at a nice 3-0. We'll see how that works out for us. Moving on. Toronto Ultra versus the Minnesota Rokkr. It is the Battle of the North. Love to see it. I had this actually happening in my losers bracket at the major one. It didn't happen, but I'm excited that at the very least we get to see it here in week number 1 of major 2. I feel bad because Minnesota are just continuing to take on the Titans. Like, they just cannot seem to get away from some of our top caliber rosters. We talked about it, right? That was the big thing for Minnesota, was that, you know, at major 1 qualifiers, they faced off against pretty much every top team. When it came down to the tournament, they were facing off against solid rosters as well. They beat LAG down 3-0 convincing, which was great to see. Then they took on the Thieves, right, in that very next match. So it was like they can't get away. They can't face one of our bottom 4 rosters ever. It just appears to be that way. So they're starting things off versus Toronto. And as I know, we talked about Toronto a little bit. I know I just touched on Rokkr, so I know I'm jumping back and forth a lot. Really quick, Minnesota opening game, beat LAG down 3-0. Very convincing W. Everybody's like, okay, how are they going to play versus the Thieves? Goes exactly the way that you would expect it to coming into the tournament. Minnesota walking away with the search destroy. LA Thieves walking away with all the respawns. So with that, it feels like this could be a good situation for Minnesota, right? Because they finally might have the advantage versus a top team in hardpoint. If you didn't know, Toronto somehow managed to finish top 4 at the Optic Texas Major, despite going 0-7 in hardpoint. I still have no idea how that's possible. I really have no clue. That is one of the more impressive yet weird feats that we've seen in COD history. For a team to finish top 4 with the level of competition that we have nowadays, despite going 0-7 in hardpoint, not just going winless, 0-7. They're playing a lot of series, folks. They somehow managed to get top 4. That just goes to show the strength that this team has in search, destroy specifically, and in control. So I know we're talking about a hard point. That to me will be the story of this series. So in topic with that, one thing that I would like to see Toronto do, get rid of the auto veto on Tuscan. They keep auto vetoing Tuscan hardpoint. There's obviously a reason for that. I don't want to see that continue to be their auto veto. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, if you are losing the way that you are on a majority of different maps, why aren't we playing Tuscan? And I want to see that change. I want to make sure that my notes are correct. I'm looking at Toronto. They are 0-2 on Tuscan. Toronto is 0-3 on Gavutu. Toronto is 3-2 on Bocage and 1-3 on Berlin. So I know I'm telling them to play Tuscan, but I feel like you got to strengthen the map pool somewhere. That used to be their auto veto. Teams were finally starting to play them on it because Toronto was struggling in a number of different areas. One of the solid picks for Ultra previously used to be Berlin Hardpoint. They looked amazing on that map at the Kickoff Classic. Nobody wanted to play him on it. Ultra played it 3 times at the Major 1, and they lost each time. They got beaten down on it, handled on it every single time. So you have to imagine for Toronto, it can't get much worse than this. I know New York's over here like, hey, yeah, it actually can. It can get worse than this, guys. But I don't see Toronto going down the same path as the Subliners. But that has to be improved, right? Versus in matchups like this specifically, and the Battle of the North specifically, this is why your hardpoint has to get better. Because a good search destroy team like Minnesota, who can win respawns, maybe not as often as we'd like them to, but they can win respawns. This is the reason why. You can't afford to have this happen. We're moving the cursor a lot right now. So predictions. I don't know. I feel like, again, honestly, all these matches, like, these are great. Like, these are some really, really good games. I gotta point it out. Like, maybe 4 out of the 5 that we've had so far, to me, are toss-ups. This one, to me, is obviously, you know, expected to go the way of the Thieves. I really could see this going either direction. You have to be impressed with what Toronto was able to do in the search destroys and in the control. I'm trying to think of Minnesota's control record. I know it's not amazing. Minnesota sits at 2-5. Toronto sits at 5-4. So I wanted to confirm that. Toronto, obviously a better control team. Search destroy wise, Minnesota at this moment stands with the best search destroy record at 7-3, 70% win rate. So Minnesota, the best search destroy team. Versus Toronto, though, that will be tested because Toronto is the top 3 search destroy team currently in the game. I don't know. I think I'm going to give the edge to Toronto. I feel like they could trade a respawn versus Minnesota. I liked them in the control, and I feel like they could also trade in the search destroys. I'm going to say this goes to a game 5, and I'm going to give Ultra the edge. I know I just said that it's a perfect opportunity for Minnesota to win a hard point, so I'm kind of going back on that. But yeah, I'm going to go with Toronto here. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, but I did just perfectly label it out saying, hey, this could be a Minnesota chance. This could be their opportunity to really perform and dominate. I will say last thing really quickly, and to maybe kind of smooth over all the fans who are now angry at me, who are fans of the Rocker, my apologies. But one thing that I thought was fascinating was that if you did watch Minnesota this weekend, when they were playing Gavutu, either control or hardpoint, Attach was dominant. I mean, Attach looked amazing with the automaton in his hands. That is something that I would like Minnesota to experiment with. I know they've tried it previously in scrimmages, but I would like to see Attach maybe full-time on an AR. Maybe you switch him and Priesta. I don't know. I just feel like with the way that Attach was playing with the AR in his hands, it just feels like he could be transitioning into that. I know he's regarded as one of the best SMG players of all time, but I just feel like with the way that he was playing with it on Gavutu, he was putting up numbers in like back-to-back series with it. I don't know. I was just very impressed by that. And I feel like this Rocker team, the strength and respawns is going to have to be there if they want to truly contend this year. There are a lot of teams who were solid at Search and Destroy this season. So if that continues to be the case, where does Minnesota fit in that department? Right now, they sit as the best Search and Destroy team in the game. So I know that is obviously a thing, but they've got to hit that. They've got to have a nice 1-2 punch. And so far, Control has not been that. So we'll see what happens. But I am going to give Toronto the edge. Just wanted to point that out because I did like what I saw from Attach. I know that didn't make a whole lot of sense on why I just said that, but I wanted to make it known because if I Attach played great. We'll move on. Okay. Seattle versus the Atlanta FaZe. Seattle, I have them versus Boston earlier in the week. I've got them going to a game 5 and losing it, and that would mean that Surge coming into this game versus FaZe, find themselves on a 5-game losing streak. So if you are a Surge fan, you are praying that they beat the Boston Breach, because you do not want to start off 0-2. You do not want to have a roster like the Atlanta FaZe ready and waiting to take you down there on Saturday. We talked about Seattle a lot. Talk about the FaZe, right? Talking about Atlanta specifically. You lost. I mean, you lost versus what is now the best team in the game. You lost twice versus Optic Texas. One of those being a reverse sweep. Get 6-0 to the Tuscan Search Destroy in Game 5. You go into the finals 5-2. You lose 5-2. You take both the Search Destroys. One of them was in round 11. I'll be honest, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. Like, I was very, very surprised that the Atlanta FaZe not only got reverse swept, but came into the finals, because they look great in the losers bracket. I mean, like, outside of dropping the first 2 maps versus LAT, which granted the game 2 went to round 11. But once FaZe won that Tuscan Control, I think it was like a 3-1. Once they won that, I knew they were going to be in finals. I think everybody knew that they were going to be in finals. I was sitting in the green room. It was like 11:30 at night. I was like, okay, that's it. FaZe are going to be in the finals. You could just feel it in the air. Despite having Toronto, despite having London up next, you just felt like FaZe was going to pile their way into the finals game. And they did that, right? They obviously managed to reverse sweep the Thieves. They go into 3-0 the Ultra. They go into 3-1 London after being up like 5-1 in the Search Destroy. So it should have been a 3-0 versus Toronto, and it should have been a 3-0 versus London. And they should have fired their way into the finals. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. The opening Gavutu, hardpoint. Wild stuff. I know that Arctis has that weird lag out on Gavutu control. I'll toss that to the side. Doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but you get my point. I just was surprised. I really was. And it'll be interesting to see what FaZe we get. I don't expect like Atlanta FaZe to be like, well, we've finally been beaten. Time to, time to give it up, guys. Like, let's go and make a roster change. Obviously not. I think that this honestly gives the Atlanta FaZe something to work toward. But I was surprised. I think Atlanta was as well. I think Atlanta was surprised that they face off against Optic, not once, but twice, and they lose both of those engagements. Very impressed, obviously, with the Optic Texas team, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But still, FaZe, let's go and move on. Okay, we'll go and move on. I don't know. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. With the way that Seattle are playing right now, this is not going to be a kickoff classic type of matchup. In my eyes, could be. Don't see it being that way. I think FaZe are ticked off. I think they're angry. And when FaZe typically loses, they come out and they destroy the next team that they see. So I think that will happen. Best of luck to Seattle in that engagement. But I think Atlanta is without a doubt the top 2 team in the game. I think they're without a doubt the second best team that we have in the CDL. And given the timing, who knows? Maybe they'll reclaim that title by the time that the Major 2 tournament rolls around. Maybe by the time that we're in Minnesota, they've claimed that title back already. No idea. But FaZe, I think, come out in 3-0 Seattle, despite not walking away with the tournament victory. So let's get into CDL Sunday. Let's get into the first Sunday of Major 2. We are starting things off with the Paris Legion taking on the Minnesota Rokkr. So Paris, in my predictions, are off of a Game 5 win versus LAG. Jimbo has a great debut. Gravity's still playing well. Like I said, based off my predictions. Again, I have no idea if Jimbo's actually going to be here. We're just rolling with that because why not? So they're going to be facing off against this very sturdy Minnesota team. Minnesota is off of a Game 5 loss versus the Toronto Ultra. So already a big game for the Rokkr. And it also sucks for Minnesota as well, because if Jimbo is actually here, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, you're kidding me, right? I'm facing off. I finally get I finally get a game versus a team who is, I guess you could say in the bottom 4, and they just made a roster change. Like, what is that about? So I do feel bad for Minnesota if that is the case. But if Rokkr are looking as good as we know that they can in Search Destroy, I mean, what? Even if they lose both the Search Destroys, worst case scenario, if Rokkr lose both the Search Destroys versus Toronto in this series, which I do not think will happen, but it's possible. Even if they lose both of these, you still know that they're one of the best Search Destroy teams in the game. So with that being the case, that is going to force Paris to have to win respawns. The way that Paris won their series versus Seattle was through the Search Destroys, and it was through the one respawn victory. Problem being is Minnesota's like, hey, we're already that type of team. Plus, we could arguably be better than you in hardpoint. So I don't know. I am going to give Minnesota the edge here. I think that Minnesota is a better team than we give them credit for. I don't have them as a top 4 roster, but I think that they can at times really surprise you when they really shouldn't. Like I don't know. To me, it's just like, I feel like Rocker sometimes can be disrespected. I feel like they can be a team that goes under the radar and can still beat top caliber teams. It's just a weird situation. I don't know. Rocker to me are also one of those wild card rosters, much like an LAG or a Florida. I think Minnesota are better than both of those teams, but much like those teams, they could be a sleeper, and they can also be, like I said, a wild card type of roster. But Paris going to have to win a respawns versus a very strong Rocker roster. Don't think it happens. Rocker are able to regain after their loss versus Toronto in my predictions. But again, Minnesota versus Toronto, maybe they win a search destroy. Maybe they beat Toronto, who at the time coming into this match is 0-7 in hardpoint. Maybe they can walk away with that dub, and then maybe they have a nice 2-0 week. That would be great if you're a Rocker fan. Ideal situation, and it is very possible. Next matchup, Florida Mutineers versus the New York Subliners. Okay, so big game. Florida is off of the loss versus the Gorillas in my predictions. Again, could go either way. We talked about that a lot. New York off of the loss versus the London Royal Ravens. They bring in Paul X. Paul plays pretty well. Who knows? Maybe Treyboy Cardi goes off. So the Subliners are hurting. They are in desperate need of a victory. They're looking at Paco saying, please, Hydra, get us a W. Get us a win in hardpoint. Maybe they'll win a hardpoint versus London. Who knows? But imagine if they are somehow 0-12 in hardpoint coming into this game versus Florida. That would be crazy. So with all those things in mind, I've talked about this a lot. Florida, very on, very off type of team. Florida, in my eyes, either 3-1s New York or Florida gets 3-1. Do you like how I did that? I feel like New York are crafty in search destroy and can also win controls. Now, if you look at the Florida records in control, which you can't see this, but I can. I'll tell you what it is. Don't worry. Florida in control is actually one of the better teams that we have in the game. They haven't played a ton of them, but they're 4-2 in overall record, with the majority of their W's coming in from Tuscan. They're 3-1 on Tuscan, and they are 1-1 on Gavutu. So that will be interesting. The coin flip will be interesting for this, because if mine serves me right, I believe that New York are... Well, they're actually 1-0 on Tuscan, and they are 2-3 on Gavutu. Okay, so maybe not. I was thinking that I was thinking that those were reversed. I thought that New York was 0-1 in Tuscan, 3-2 in Gavutu. Not the case. So maybe the coin flip doesn't mean nearly as much. But you do have to consider that Florida is winning some of their controls. So I think it comes down to the hard point. I think the game 1 hard point is going to be very, very crucial for this series. Obviously, if you're New York, you need a W. And losing to a Mutineers team, let's say that New York comes into this and they go 0-2, right? Let's say they lose versus the Ravens, who just made a roster change because of Gizmo not being able to be there. And then they lose versus the Mutineers, who are considered to be, at this moment, a bottom 4 team. That, to me, would be horrible for the Subliners. It'd be horrible for the players involved. And I think at that point, if we haven't already seen a roster change, we would see one. I do. That's just my personal prediction. I could be wrong. But you can't go 0-2 this week if you're New York. I think that if you go 0-2, that's when we see changes. That is when we see a breaking point type of situation. And it would just spell disaster. I think it really would. I mean, like I said, Clay's trying to grind. Crim's off of surgery. Hydra is fantastic, but he's going to have somebody along with him. And I feel like Royalty's been just thrown into such a weird position where he has to go off. And I feel like that's not exactly what Royalty should have to do. I feel like he is almost like a player who can take over on certain maps, but specifically he's there to help highlight the other players. Meanwhile, the other players are like, we need somebody to dominate for us. So with all those things in mind, I'm going to give New York the dub. I think that maybe Florida comes out a little bit, a little slow in this series. I think that New York has the chance to win a hard point in this game, depending on what the vetoes look like. I think they can take a search destroy, and I think that the control is up in the air. I do. I think the control is a coin flip between both of these teams. New York are not bad at control, despite how horrible the hardpoint record sits. Search destroy is not bad, and control is not horrible either. If New York can get good at hardpoint, they're actually a good team. Believe it or not, they're actually a good team. So I'm going to give New York the W, which is difficult for Florida because you lose versus LAG, you lose versus New York. Now you started off Major 2, 0-2 off of a top 12 placement at Major 1. Don't know. So let's move on to the final game of Major 2 Week 1. It is Optic Texas versus the LA Thieves. Give me this game. Like, I am so excited to see this matchup take place. This is the game to watch. There are a few games that I've circled for you, but I haven't physically circled, but I've told you to circle. This is the one that you got to watch, right? At 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on March 13th, you got to watch this game. This is the matchup that we've not got to see yet happen officially in Vanguard. We did see it happen at the Kickoff Classic, but we've not seen it officially take place so far throughout the CDL season. A big game, obviously a revenge match, a rematch just in general. Obviously, like I said, from the Kickoff Classic, and you've got specifically Optic Texas in this game, who are your defending champions. They're the team that managed to beat FaZe back-to-back, which arguably is a championship in itself. Maybe Optic just won 2 championships and we didn't even realize it. They also beat London 3-1. They beat Surge earlier on 3-0. Optic goes 14-5 in overall map count. They finish off 5-2 in Hardpoint, 4-3 in Search Destroy, with all 3 of those Search Destroy losses versus the Atlanta FaZe. And then on top of that, one of the more impressive stats is that they go 4-0 in Control, with 2 of those wins being on Gavutu, a map that they had only played 1 time coming into their major. Speaking of their major, it is the first time that the Optic banner has won a championship since CWL Vegas 2018. Landon, you're wrong. They actually won an MW. That was the Huntsman. Gotcha. So like I said, it is the first win, though, since, however you want to describe it, Hex and Scump, you know, the core team who obviously transitioned from Optic to Chicago Huntsmen for that MW season. We know that they did win twice, right, in that MW year. They won, I think, week 2, the London home series, and week 8, the Seattle home series. I'm pretty sure it's those 2. If not, I apologize. But it's the first time that the name Optic officially has won a championship since 2018, which was the very first event that Dashi was actually brought in to Optic as well. Black Ops 4, great event, great tournament, one of the crazier tournaments that we've seen in COD history, and now they got the chance to do it again. They reverse sweep FaZe, which was, I think, like almost 1,000 days to the date where they did it, and Black Ops 4 versus Atlanta as well. Crazy storylines, crazy situations. Dashi, I know we just talked about him. Bruce posts a 1.31 KD, unbelievable stats. Especially considering that he was facing off against FaZe twice, considering that he was in the finals versus FaZe, the fact that he faced off against London, the fact that he's putting up numbers like that versus arguably the number 2 and number 3, if not number 4, depending where you have them, teams in the game, is fantastic. Scump posts a 1.13 KD, which was phenomenal. It felt like everything finally went right for Optic, a team who's been under all kinds of turmoil, right? With the brand debacles, with the, you know, the team changes. They go from Optic to Huntsman, back to Optic Chicago. Now they're in Optic Texas with Envy. The merger happens. And on top of it all, weeks ago, we talked about it, right? What's going on with Optic? Or what's going on with this team? They start off 0-2. They start off losing back-to-back Game 5 Round 11 losses, one of which is a reverse sweep versus the Ravens. We're wondering, like, okay, this next game that they have has got to be a W. They go on to win their next 3 games. They go on to come into their major, their house, their stadium, and they win it all. It's an incredible story. And I understand if you're not an Optic fan, it could sound like Landon's really beefing this up. But it is one of the more interesting stories that we've seen in a very long time. It's the first time in 4 years that we have seen the name of Optic finally back on top, finally winning championships again. And it was great to see. It was great to see with the story. It was great to see. And honestly, I'm honestly rooting for them in some ways because of the Optic Texas merger, of the Optic Envy merger. You're obviously in their home stadium. They want to win. I'm always rooting for the team who's on home soil in some ways, right? I'm not always like, oh yeah, Optic's got to win the entire thing. But you do, as a fan, as a viewer, as a Call of Duty fan, you do always hope that the team who's representing where they're at on home soil can at least perform well. And they absolutely did that. So massive props to Optic Texas. Major congratulations to them. And they are jumping right in to a phenomenal series versus the LA Thieves, who are off of a win versus London the prior day. Envoy is looking for even more revenge. He's just hungry for revenge. He wants to continue to take down Optic as many times as possible. Show them that they can't win without him, even though they just won. So scratch that. It is the #1 hardpoint team in the game versus the #1 control team in the game. And I hope that in this matchup, we see a Tuscan hardpoint. Why, you may ask, is because both of these teams are 4-0 on Tuscan hardpoint. I just cannot wait to see this battle happen again, but really for the first time officially. Getting into the nitty-gritty of this, I think that Optic have the ability to trade the hard points. I really do. I feel like if there's a team out there, whether it's FaZe or London or whoever, with the LA Thieves having a 14-3 hardpoint record, I feel like Optic can trade in one of the hard points. A lot of this is going to be on the vetoes without question. But in Search Destroy, you like Optic there over the Thieves. And in Control, you probably like Optic in this one as well. Now, the coin flip is going to be big. Optic are 3-0, I believe, on Gavutu. 2 of those W's are on Gavutu as well. So, like I said, they basically what happened with Optic, they love Tuscan, right? They absolutely love Tuscan. Cannot get enough of Tuscan Control. They finally have to play a Gavutu Control. They do so. They beat Boston on it 3-0. Then Optic is then required to play a Gavutu Control versus, let me make sure I get this right. They're required to play a Gavutu Control versus London. They go on and they 3-0 London on Gavutu Control. Then they go on to face, I believe, right? They face off against, it had to be FaZe, right? Yeah, they face off against FaZe in the finals on Gavutu, and they win it 3-2. So they've won their last 3 Gavutus. I think I said they 3-0 their last 3 Gavutus. That's not true. They've won their last 3 Gavutus, and 2 of those W's have been in a 3-0 fashion. So that's something to consider. But we know that playing the LA Thieves on Gavutu is never a good idea. So if you're Optic, you prefer to play Tuscan versus the Thieves, most likely in Control. But it wouldn't be the worst thing if you do have to play Gavutu because you've been good on it. And the Thieves are also very solid on that as well. So the vetoes will be interesting. We could see a Bocage in this matchup because the Thieves like to play it. Optic also likes to play it. I don't know. There's all kinds of choices. Like, as much as I'd love to dive into the vetoes of this, there are so many different avenues. There's so many different routes that both these teams could want to play on. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a great series. I think it's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to go down in the wire. I think that all maps have the ability to be close, but in my eyes, I think that the Thieves, you could argue at the top, are a top 3 team right now, maybe the 3rd, maybe the 4th. You know, obviously them versus London could, is an interesting story. And don't count this matchup because it's not the full Ravens roster. So with that in mind, this series is going to tell us as well, like, how distant is everybody outside of Optic and FaZe? Because we know that Optic's #1. We know the FaZe is #2 for right now. But how far back is LAT? How far back is London? How far back is Toronto? How far back is the next team after that? How far are these teams away from the top 2? This series will tell us that. This series will give us a better understanding of where the Thieves sit. And if the Thieves really compete, you could argue that maybe the Thieves are the 3rd best team in the game if you already don't think that. So all of those things in mind, I am going to give Optic the W. I feel like it just makes sense. Positive for Optic, right, is the fact that you also do have a very, very short turnaround. You're playing this basically a week after your W. So you're not playing on Friday, which you prefer to, but you at least get to play on Sunday. Positive for Optic as well. You also get to watch the LA Thieves play on Saturday. You've got this whole week to prepare for them. You've got this whole week to watch VOD, to be prepared for this team, and to maybe pick apart their hardpoint setups. Maybe point out the weaknesses, because Lord knows there's not a lot of them, and you got to do a lot of hunting to figure out where the Thieves are struggling at. But like I said, I like Optic's chances to either trade some of the hardpoints. I like them more in Search and Destroy, and depending on the Control, if they get a Tuscan, I like them there. And I'm really not angry about a Gavutu Control. I think that probably goes to a round 5, and it really depends on kills at that point. or segments. I don't know if segments are coming in at Major 2. That's something we need to figure out. So I think that's going to be it. I think that's going to be our predictions. We're clocking in at over an hour. I know that a lot of people are kind of turning this into a podcast, so this has been a nice listen for you. Well, I'll say this. I hope that's been a nice listen for you. If you've been watching this, I greatly appreciate that as well. Guys, let me know on social media. Let me know on Twitter. Let me know on YouTube in the comments your thoughts on our predictions for this week. Do you like where we went with things? Do you not like where we went with things? Did we play it safe because we didn't maybe have a dramatic upset, or do we play it perfectly? I don't know. You let me know. Also, one thing that I want you guys to do as well, put in the comments a major matchup, whether it's the Optic versus LA Thieves, whether it is London versus New York, or London versus Florida, LAG versus Florida. Let me know one of your wilder predictions that you have coming into this week. I want to see some spicy ones. Been a pin or like and comment on all the predictions that you guys send our way. If you have not done so already, I would greatly appreciate a like. If you have not done so already, make sure to subscribe as well. You guys have been great. Really appreciate the support on this series. And as I said, I promise we got some more awesome content coming your way. Appreciate the support. We'll go ahead and lock in the predictions just so we know it's real. And that will be it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Look forward to us kicking off Major 2 in the greatest way possible. We got some excellent games. As I said, a lot of predictions where I have no idea which way that they're going to go, which means that we are in store for a phenomenal start to Major 2. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next week for another edition of Lando's Lock-Ins. Have a great day and enjoy Major 2, guys.